more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And if there's anything that you like about what we're talking about today, you can go to the website, livingyourinspiredlife.org, and listen to other great conversations we've been having with very amazing people doing awesome work in the world today. And that is livingyourinspiredlife.org. So with that said, I am just honored and thrilled to have a conversation with somebody who has been doing some really out-of-the-box work in the world, and it just seems to keep expanding. So I want to welcome today Nipun Mehta. Nipun, thank you for calling in and being here.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you for holding space for Inspired Live.
So we're going to talk about what it is you do, but you call it Giftivism. Did I say that right?
Yeah, sure. It's like activism, but without
Gifting.
an opponent. It's Giftivism.
Yeah, and so this what you guys define it as is the practice of radical acts of generosity around the world. And you have, over the last several years, really, this work has gone around the world because you have a website called servicespace.org. So let's just kick off what Giftivism is, and we'll get to the rest of it.
Sure. I think for me it starts with small acts of kindness. You know, when you do a small act of kindness, your first impulse is, I want to do it for the other person. But after a while you realize that actually it's changing you. It's making you feel better too. Even if you have no contact with the other person and you have no idea how it kind of ripples out into the world, it still changes you. And you're left with a smile. You're left with an open heart. You're left with feeling a kind of high. So this idea of Giftivism, so many times we try to change things in the world, but we forget that our own transformation is connected with the change that we're creating out in the world. And so what happens when we realize that what happens when you try to create social change without an opponent? And you can resist a certain kind of an action in the world, but you don't have to resist the entire person or an entire system in that way. And we realized there was no word for it, so we came up with one, and we called it Giftivism, which is really, as you said, the practice of radical acts of generosity that change the world, and radical in the sense that it changes not just the recipient of your act, but it changes you, and somehow that transformation in you is connected to, the ripple that goes out. And so it's that exploration which ultimately is rooted in the smallest of acts of kindness.
So then let's talk about servicespace.org, because you started that as an extra component of this Giftivism, right? Where people can go on the website and find ways to volunteer and serve around the world.
Yeah, the service space started in 1999, and we were in our early 20s. So we didn't really have ideas of, we didn't know what inner transformation was, or we didn't know, Giftivism wasn't a word in our vocabulary at the time. But we just wanted to go out and help people. And as we started to help people, we realized that we're actually helping ourselves. And it felt right. The first project we did in 1999, this is remember, it's like the internet is barely coming out.
Right.
And so we went to a homeless shelter and we told them, hey, we want to help you. What can we do? And they said, well, you tell us. What can you do? And we said, well, we don't know, but we're happy to do anything, but we've got these skills. And it ended up that, we ended up building them a website. And at that time, it's like they didn't even know what a website was. Like, oh, internet, okay. And they thought we would like come in on the weekend and put a website into their computer or something like that. But we said, no, we do it at home. And they're like, well, what kind of volunteering is this? But it felt so good to be of service with no strings attached. We didn't want our logo, we didn't want any money, we didn't want to like build an organization. It wasn't about like doing big things in the world. It was just genuine act of love, and that felt right. And so we said, let's do it again. And we did it again and we told our friends about it, and they didn't feel like they're signing up for some big thing. They were just like, yeah, hey, we're okay. It's like your buddy tells you, go check out this movie. And you check it out. And it's not like, there's an agenda or he's getting a commission out of the movie sales or anything. It's just an honest recommendation. And so like that, we would recommend these service projects, and people would engage, and bit by bit, it just kind of moved on to so many different projects, and from building websites to then creating web portals around things that the world really didn't have enough of, like good news.
Right. That's one of your other things that you guys do is the dailygood.org, yes?
Yeah.
I've been a subscriber of that for a while, and I'll tell you, I love it because if I'm just having a rough day, I go there and I read something, and my day is better. I'm inspired.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, see, the thing is when you go to something like CNN.com, I mean, they're just going to, it's like news that bleeds leads, as they say. And it's just they try to reach out to a very base impulse, which is this fear instinct in people that, oh my God, there's something, really bad that's going to happen. And as a result, you're tuned in. And when you're tuned in, they get advertising dollars, and that's how they sustain themselves. But there are deeper ways, and if that's all we get, it becomes, it's a very sad world. If I grow up just thinking that everyone is like a mean person, everyone's out there to, take advantage of each other, the world is a scary place, don't trust anybody. If that's the narrative in my head, I mean, that's really, I think human beings are way better than that, and I think there's a lot of stories that don't make it to CNN that are actually the dominant stories, that ought to be the dominant paradigm stories, stories that people helping each other, people living up to their higher potential, and things of the sort. So we started, like Daily Good, we started creating different portals like KarmaTube, which is around just videos, inspiring videos. YouTube has all kinds of videos, but then we thought there should be a portal around, inspiring videos, nonviolent videos, wholesome videos that uplift you. And so like that, we just started creating a whole ecosystem. And service space, if there was a sentence to describe it, I don't know if this cannot qualify as our mission statement, but I would say that it's a bridge between the internet and its capacities and our internet, what happens within us and how we connect, how the deeper we go within ourselves, the deeper our connection to others around us as well.
Oh, I like that idea. And we talk about that on Living Your Inspired Life all the time, about if you're connected within yourself, then everything in your world and how your interactions are change radically, because you are really living from that place of inner wisdom and authenticity. And then to be of service from that place, that's, that it is. It's like what you said earlier, it just cracks you open into this really wonderful feeling.
Exactly. And I think when that happens collectively, there's an amplified potential to that. If I was just doing it by myself and you were doing it by yourself, I think it would have its own ripple, and that's a beautiful thing. But then when we start to do it together, I think it's not just 1 + 1. It's no longer just 2. It starts to look a lot more like 11.
Yeah. Or 1,100 or 11,000.
Yeah. So I think there's a synergistic power to this. So the internet has been used for so many things, but how can we use it for the power of love? I mean, as we often say that we've seen the power of the internet for profit. Certainly, we've seen plenty of that. We've also seen it for protest, but we haven't seen enough for love. And I think we need to, and the reason is because it's very hard to monetize, and so we don't have institutional capacity to create that. But because we're all volunteer-run, it gives us this latitude to do things that ought to be done, but no one's doing it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that because then it doesn't feel like you're doing what's inwardly being asked of you to do. I was going to say what's right, but everybody's inward thing might be different. But also without really scaring your higher ups, if you will, by taking a financial risk.
Yeah, and I think so many times we're so obsessed with that one singular question of how I'm going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, that's important. It's yes, it's important to am I going to brush my teeth tomorrow? Yes. Do I need toothpaste? Yes. But I don't go around spending my whole day thinking about, oh my God, what if I run out of toothpaste? Or what happens when I'm 60? It's yes, it's a detail. You think about it, but you don't need to be so obsessed on that one particular question. And I think we just have created a world that encourages that kind of obsession with money. And this kind of gets you to a very different mindset, which says, look, just give, and when you give, there's a kind of mental stillness, and in that mental stillness, you fall into a sense of enough. And when you have enough, you're wow, maybe I don't need so many things that these ads are telling me that I'm incomplete.
Right.
And it's buy my product, buy my service, and then you'll be complete. And it's, we know that it never quite works like that. We never feel complete because of, going out and consuming more. But we can arrive at contentness by actually contributing, So I think that's the process, and that's an important shift, from consumption to contribution.
So let's talk about that, because that's you have listed that there's 4 key ideas to Giftivism, and that's the first one, this consumption to contribution. Now, and as I was reading these about them and remembering when I've heard you speak before, it is really the inverse of what our current reality is. It's so. Again, I want to say kudos to you guys, because you are really co-creating this new idea, this new paradigm in the world that we've been talking about on Living Your Inspired Life with a bunch of different people, where we're really now in this new place that has never been lived from before collectively, of being interconnected and interconnected and wanting to make choices that will be about sustainability for the planet, for our livelihood, all of that. And Giftivism sounds like it is already doing that by setting up the inner paradigm and awareness that a lot of people don't have, because we've just been stuck in this materialistic consumerism. So let's talk about consumption to contribution.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very significant point, and you're absolutely right in the sense that our society is completely the opposite. Right, you're trained as a consumer, right, from the get-go. You have marketers that are selling, they're selling products to kids that aren't even a year old, and they're want to make sure that the brand is recognized. And even if you go to the grocery stores and you look at cereals, you're going to have kids' cereals that are going to be on the lowest shelf for the kids, because they've realized that if you appeal to the kids in a certain way, they recognize the cereals, they'll nag, and that nagging is going to lead to more sales. So they call it the nag factor. Researchers study this stuff, and so we live in this world where it just leads with consumerism, and consumption is a very me-centered idea. Whereas contribution is the exact opposite. It's a very we-centered idea. And it's the shift from not me first, but we first. What can I give? If you open each door and the first question you ask is, what am I going to get out of this? You're probably going to have a very different relationship with that context or circumstance than if you open the door and you say, what can I contribute here?
You know, and as I'm hearing you say that, Nipun, it feels just in my personal experience that the me first versus the we first, it feels very limiting. And my experience has been, when I think of it that way within myself, okay, what am I going to get out of it? It becomes all these doors start closing. Or, you know, like if you're out looking for a job, in my past, when I have done that, it's like, okay, so what am I going to get out of this if I get that job?
Yeah.
You know, and then those doors shut. And I've been in and out of unemployment in my life because I was an actress for a while. So I also understand that paradigm of I got to look out for me. But this we first, that is, it's life changing and it's internally changing.
And it totally works, right? I mean, imagine if someone comes up to you and they're looking to get something from you. And that's going to have such a different energy than if they engage you and they're like just trying to, just be there holding space and seeing how they can contribute. It's so disarming when a person is operating from the space of contribution. And in that disarmingness, there's a higher trust, right? There's a higher connection.
Yeah.
And once you build that trust and connection, then things just kind of flow through without it feeling like a transaction, And so that sort of emerges, and which is actually the second shift that we talk about. The first being consumption to contribution. The second one is about transaction to trust, where everything is not just a quid pro quo. You may be able to help me in a certain way, and I may not be able to help you in the same exact way. But we are in a web of, connected conditions. And so if I'm able to help someone else in a very different way, and that person's able to help someone else in a very different way, and then that third person, may be able to help that first person, it starts to create a circle of gifts, a community with very deep connections where everyone's needs are still met, but it's not a transactional interaction. And I think all that starts with people, opening each door and just practicing with this idea of contribution, leading with contribution. How can I contribute? And it sounds like you're sacrificing, your interests for the sake of others' interests, but in practice, it is not a sacrifice at all. In fact, it's a celebration, because you realize that, wow, I'm celebrating the goodness in this person, and I just want to contribute, to the, you can call it the divine in him, or you can call it by whatever name you want to call it, but you really start honoring that deepest part of the person or the collective in front of you, and as you do that, you honor that in yourself, and you allow for deep connections to happen, and as that creates a community over time, you're taken care of way more than you would be just, in a me first kind of a paradigm.
Nipun, I have a sidebar question about this because I live in Ojai, and there's a plethora of nonprofits, and everybody has a nonprofit that they're trying to get funded, that they want to support, and within that are also the people that get burned out trying to make it work, type of thing. So how would you speak to people like that? Because I think it's also similar with people that just have day jobs, regular jobs, but this place of giving, and then you feel and you hit burnout. It sounds like, from what you just said, that maybe that comes because there's still a little idea of, well, what am I going to get out of it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. That there is, although it might be subtle, it might be understated, it may be subconscious, but the more we have, the more me that's in there, that's what creates the burnout. That's what gets us feeling tired. That's what leaves us with a heavy feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we approach, so many times we're doing noble work, but we do it in a paradigm of scarcity still, right? Where you start to say, oh, there's only limited amount of funding, you know, and there are all these nonprofits, and like Ojai, I'm in San Francisco area, and that has the highest nonprofits per capita.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In the country, and so you do have this kind of competition even in the nonprofit sector where people start, they have honorable goals, but then it's just pits them against each other. And part of it, I think you have to look within yourself and be genuinely detached, because so many times just because you're doing good work doesn't mean you're coming at it from a very noble heart, and it's a process to do that. So that's one thing, and the other thing is that some of it is just systemic, because money, if you study money, it actually is issued. It comes out into the world as debt, and
God, yes, it does.
And when it comes out as debt, we have to have growth to pay that debt back. And when you have to have growth, but you are in a world with finite resources, you start pillaging and you start making compromises, and that doesn't help the earth, nor does it help. It doesn't help our inner sustainability either. We start burning out. We start seeing people as instruments for facilitating that kind of growth, and then it's no longer about that person being fulfilled from the work that they're doing. And so as a result, there's a systemic reason as well, and there's a personal growth cultivation reason as well. So this is, this I think it's a complex question, but our approach has been, look, we're just not going to ask for money. Like, we're just not going to fundraise. Like, that's one of our principles. Actually, it's been true since 1999. We've never ever fundraised.
Okay, so like there is literally, Nipun, as you said that, there's a part of my brain going, how is that possible? I'm like shaking my head here going, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's the gratitude economy, right? In the sense that if you give, for example, one of our projects is called it's Smile Cards, where it encourages people to do a small act of kindness, and you leave a smile card behind and tells the person that you don't know who did that act of kindness for you, keep the chain going, do something for someone else. And so these smile cards, let's say you want to order them, how do you get it? Well, you go to a website and you place an order and you get it, but there's no charge, and people will ship it to you. Now, as they ship it to you and you receive it, let's say you're in Cameroon and you were tagged on some flight with a smile card, and you're like, wow, this is great. I want a smile card so I can spread this in my community. So you go to the website, you order it, and it comes. And there's no charge, and you realize that someone has, gone through the trouble of placing 10 cards in an envelope, and they've paid international postage, and they've handwritten your address, and it has been gifted to you. And how do you respond to that gift? Right? Do you just say, well, okay, someone else has covered it, I don't need to do anything about it? Do you feel a little bit of gratitude?
Yeah.
And if you feel that gratitude, maybe you channel it somewhere else in your community. But some of it is a certain percentage of the people, maybe 10% of the people, are going to say, wow, that was really nice. And you know what? It left me with a really nice feeling that it was given with no strings attached. And I want to contribute to that, not for myself because I've already received, but I want to contribute to that someone after. May someone else have another experience. And so you'll have people sending, sometimes even just $1, right? They're spending, 50 cents on like the envelope and the stamp and all that, and they're sending $1 because for them it's important that they pay forward, that their gratitude finds an expression, and they facilitate even that micro moment for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that like we've lost faith in gratitude, like we feel that if kindness can't work because we're so filled with a very different narrative. But it turns out that if you actually trust people to pay forward, that there will be enough of them that they do if you create a strong enough context. And we run a restaurant this way.
Yes. Let's talk about that, Karma Kitchen, because I love this idea, and yes, please.
It's totally counter paradigm, right?
It is
counterculture in a way, because so you walk into Karma Kitchen and your check reads 0. It's like any other restaurant. You get your meal and the check reads 0. Now it's 0, and it explains it. It's 0 because someone before you paid for your meal, and you get to pay forward for people after you. Are you going to pay forward? How much are you going to pay forward? all that is really up to you. And people, initially when you tell them this idea, and they say, well, no, people are selfish. No one's going to pay forward. You go through the whole list of things. But it turns out, and we've done this in over a dozen cities around the world, is that it's, people are actually moved to be kind. People will pay forward. And in so many cases, they'll pay forward way more than what they felt like they received, just because the gratitude is so strong. And if you create a strong enough context in that space, like if there's this, nice quote under the table, if the servers, who are all volunteers, are full of smiles, if in between you have a child, they bring out a smile deck and ask them to pick a card from a deck, and each card has a kindness idea, and now their brains are thinking about kindness. This is someone's birthday, and someone sings a birthday song, and someone else says, hey, I can sing that in Spanish, and someone else says, hey, I have a version of it that we sing at a senior center. I'd love to offer that. And there's just like this collective ambiance that's created in a space, and it's purely gratitude, and people respond to that. Inevitably, people respond to that. And so it's just a very different way of looking at the world and your relationship in the world.
So what you're also describing is how you can walk in. Let's continue with the Karma Kitchen paradigm. You can walk in there by yourself, right? And order a meal and begin to experience the collective wow of everybody else that's eating there and serving there and all of that. And then that just grows out into a feeling of I want to say oneness, but a feeling of community. Yeah,
absolutely. Certainly a feeling of connectedness, because what happens is you come in, you have a meal, and you're just happy, and you're like, wow, these guys are all happy. They're a volunteer run, and it's just like there's a flavor to it that touches your heart. And then when you get the check, it forces you to ask two very important questions. One is it says, wow, what is my relationship to the person who came before me? Because if it is because of that person whom I'll never meet that person contributed, and which is why I got a gift. Right? So now I'm forced to create a relationship with someone before me. And just like that, the second important question is I'm forced to create a relationship to those who come after you. Right? So this is not like a pay what you can. Pay what you can is still in the me paradigm. It's like whatever I can afford in this moment based on my circumstances. It's still very me-oriented.
Yeah.
But this is saying that now that you have received, from that receiving, now it's see if you're moved to give. See if you're moved to pay forward. And again, you're paying forward in a way that where the person's never going to be able to come back and thank you. So it's like you're just gifting, you're just keeping the chain alive. And when you do that, the experiment is see how you feel, right? See how you feel. Like, is it the same as going out and consuming something? So imagine two experiences, or imagine you're at a toll booth, right? And there are two lanes in the toll booth. In one lane, everyone pays forward for people after them. And in the other lane, everyone pays for their own, like a traditional toll booth lane.
Uh-huh.
At the end of the day, you're roughly going to have the same amount of money in each cash register, right? But which lane do you want to be in? I want to be in the one where the guy in front of me is, voluntarily paying for the cars behind him. Maybe he pays for two, maybe he pays for one. And I want to have, you feel a kind of sense of relationship with that. And then you pay for the car behind you yourself, and you you kind of create although you'll never talk with those people, you'll have a very different, you'll go home and you'll feel a lot more connected. So I think that's the choice that we have. Is we will still make the ends meet. We'll still have the material. The ledgers work itself out, but there's just a whole different dimension of value, a whole different dimension of interconnectedness that you experience and you feel. And it's not theoretical, and it's like no one's telling you you're going to feel it or not.
Right.
It's like we just trust in that. Like you walk in and no one's giving you a lecture on how all this works. You walk in and it's up to you. How are you going to pay forward, or whether you're going to pay forward. And lo and behold, people, end up paying forward remarkably.
I think this whole idea, Nipun, is so timely because we've become such a disconnected world, at least in America. There's so many sprawling metropolises now that you don't want, and you don't know who's living next door to you, and do you want to know them? The old idea of neighborhoods and knowing your neighbors on the entire block and having a block party or barbecue because they're your neighbors and you want to connect is really kind of gone. Maybe people do it in their apartment buildings or condo buildings, but even then we've become and I gotta say, it seems like with the internet, with the advent of computers and everything, everybody becomes so self-contained in a coffee shop, on an airplane, in the world, that they're not, just being with whoever they're sitting next to and just watching them or talking to them.
Totally. We have these we have a summer internship program, and every week we select a theme, and we ask people to reflect and do certain practices around those themes. And so this week's theme was simplicity. And one of the interns, 14-year-old, says she decided to give up social media. And we said, why? And she says, I just want to give up social media for a week because I just feel like I get obsessed with people's hourly updates on what they're doing. And you think it connects you, and it does in a certain way, but in a certain way, it disconnects you, too, because you just think that's the real connection,
right.
And you never quite migrate from that to something else, This is a 14-year-old, and there was another person, then they all started talking about it, 5 of them are like, yeah, that's actually true, and it's like you try to maximize the number of likes and the number of posts, this and that, and this is in their words. They said, you can't let Facebook, just give what did they say? Something really beautiful. They said, let me see if I can get it right. Facebook is just a material representation of our social relationships.
Ooh.
Real friendships go way deeper.
Ooh, yes, and that's so cool. I got chills when you said that. Yes.
Absolutely. And so I think that how do you, I think people are longing, what Facebook has done and other social networks have done is given us an incredible tool in building a breadth of connections. Like we're able to loosely connect with people, for people you grow up with, people that were on, in some class that you took, at a community college in between, or, all kinds of places you can all stay connected. But what it's not good at is the depth of connections.
Yeah.
And that depth is what's lacking. And you're not going to get that online. You're not going to get that through a social network. And what are we going to get that through? And our hypothesis at ServiceSpace is that you're going to get that when we are engaged in a relationship of generosity, these 4 shifts to go from, consumption to contribution, to go from transaction to trust. And then you arrive at the 3rd shift, which is from isolation to community. And then ultimately the 4th, which is to go from scarcity to abundance, where you feel like there's enough. Because now as soon as if you're not isolated and you're in community, you realize that, it's not that there's enough money. It's not that, oh, wow, I'm shifted from scarcity of money to abundance of money. It's that now you realize that money is not the only form of wealth, that there's so many different kinds of wealth that I need, that everyone needs to be nourished. And we all have the capacity to provide that if we are engaged in that kind of a deep community. And so I think these are very important questions, particularly for the younger generation, to be reflecting on and saying, what is my appropriate relationship to the tools and to our phones and to technologies that promise and they provide and they deliver on that promise of a certain kind of wealth. In case of social networks, a wealth of very broad breadth of connections. But then how do you cultivate, so many other kinds of wealth, in particular the depth of connection.
Yeah, so I think that this what you're talking about the giving and giving with no strings attached, and that creates that depth of connection. What about the people, Nipun, that you want to give them something and they go, no, I don't want that. Or, you know what, I can't. Like, okay, for instance, I have a friend who is having surgery today. And so we were asking her last night at dinner, so what can we do? Oh, no, you don't have to do anything. She's going to be in the hospital for a week or more. No, really. And when you get home, what can we do? Nothing. I've got, it's fine. I've got people that'll bring, no, really, what can, it's like she just would not allow us to give.
Yeah.
And I finally turned to her and said, look, forget about it being about you. It's about us. We want to do this for you.
Right. No, it's, receiving is a very hard thing. One of the things I often talk about is this idea of give, receive, and dance, where, we start with this idea of giving, but there's actually, it's just as you learn how to give, you realize that there's also a lot of receiving that we need to learn how to do.
Oh, yeah.
Both as a giver and as, as an instrument for other people to practice giving. So I think there's this journey of learning how to receive. And then there's this third step in that journey, which is dancing, in the sense that you're not keeping track of how much you're giving and receiving. But yes, it's a very real thing in the sense of, like, we have prided ourselves on being independent. We're not used to. We want to be the ones that are giving, and we don't want to be the ones that are receiving, because that's somehow seen as weaker.
Yeah.
But actually, it's impossible to give without receiving, and sometimes when you are receiving, you're giving, an opportunity for others to practice giving. And so all of this starts to become very intertwined. And it's a cultural thing as well, of what kinds of things you value. I mean, is it weak to give or receive? And ultimately to be dancing. I mean, I don't think it's a position of weakness at all. I think it's a position of weakness to just, to feel like you want to be taking all the time.
Well, and of course you do, because you've been practicing this for a couple of decades now. But, there's an older generation I'm witnessing that, okay, so like my father is turning 80, and this idea of, here, Dad, let me help you with that to get it up the stairs. No, I can do it. Well, you know what, Dad, how about I make you dinner tonight? Why? I can cook. Oh, good grief. And I think that there is, not to blanket everything, but there is a generational kind of thing of, no, I have done this. You tapped on it just briefly, but I have done this and I can take care of myself. And they do see it as a sign of weakness. And yet it's not, because when you're giving out of love, why can't you just sit down and let me cook you dinner?
Yeah. And I think it's a matter of practice. One of my friends wrote me an email a while back saying, Nipun, I love to give, but I'm really bad at receiving. And I don't like to receive things from other people. And my advice to her was practice more giving. Because when you have given enough, if you haven't given enough, you will not realize that the joy of receiving something. Because when you give so much, then you realize that you actually are only given a fraction of what you're receiving in return. And when you actually see that full cycle and you realize, wow, what a joy it is to receive, then you start to be in a certain way that makes it easier for others to be practicing in that same cycle. So I think there's that. But when we encounter people like you said, like your dad that says, no, I got it, don't worry about it. Which is to say that people are just doing their own thing and they don't want to be in relationship or community with you in that very moment. I think there's a kind of skillfulness. I don't think we need to superimpose and say, no, in this moment you have to receive in this way. Mm-hmm. But I think be gentle, be humble. And I learned this. I'll tell you where I learned this. In 2005, my wife and I went on a walking pilgrimage across India.
Okay, wow.
And we basically sold everything we had, and we decided to go to the Gandhi ashram and we said that we're just going to walk south, and we're going to eat whatever food is offered and sleep wherever place is offered. And we ended up walking over 1,000 kilometers, and you have like no security so many times. You know, no one really cares what your business card says. You don't have money for your own meals or where you're going to stay. There's this insecurity of what comes after. I mean, it's a really paradigm-bending, situation. I mean, for those 3 months were incredibly powerful for me. But one of the things, like when you're out on the streets, it's like, and you encounter someone, and they're in their own world, they're doing their own thing, and they're not really interested in, they are not asking for help, they're not asking to be connected, and they're just going about their business. And how do you then, figure out ways to be of service? And our whole model was like, how are you going to get fed? How are you going to be taken care of? Well, if you serve other people, you'll be in relationship. And when you're in enough relationships, some of them may spontaneously, take care of you, right? But if you don't serve, so if you don't have enough, or if you feel like you're not going to have enough, it's an indication that you need to serve. Now, how are you going to serve? Right? I may not even know the language, but hey, you know what? There's a lot of trash in this community. Maybe you become super humble and you say, okay, I'll just gently pick up the trash and move it to the side. Or there's a guy, pushing his little cart. Maybe I can help him do that. Or there's an old man I remember carrying, a whole bag of hay on his very heavy, a sack of hay on his head. And I said, I connected with him. And I said, you're like my grandfather. Would you please kindly let me, lift this for you? It would make me very happy, to be doing that, if you gave me that opportunity. And when presented in that way, of course he let me. And he was the happiest guy, because I was lifting his load. Or someone whose car is stuck, and you help them push the car. These are all small things. But what you learn to do is create new neural pathways in your mind and in your heart. You open your heart in a very different way, where it's not like, your dad may not want a meal. He may want to make his own meal. But maybe you can, open the blinds for him. Or maybe you can do something very small and subtle and gentle that over time becomes a gateway to then do so many other things. So this idea of creating connection through relationship, through generosity, also requires us to be very nimble and humble about how and what we offer, and how and it's a very dynamic. It's like art, it's not science, because you have to really feel into that moment and go out and do it. I'm thinking of one of my friends. She runs a foundation. She used to run a foundation at the time, and she heard me tell some kind of stories, and she's like, okay, I'm going to try this, and so she's out filling up gas. And so she says, okay, I'm going to go out and, I'm just going to tell that woman behind me that I'm going to pay for her gas. So she goes over, she takes out a 20 from her wallet, and she's like, here, this is for you. And the woman's like, what is this? He's like, well, it's a $20 bill for you to pay, for you to fill up your gas. And she's like, no, I don't want it. And so this woman comes back to me, and she's like, Nipun, the stories you said, it was like, I was like so moved, and they sounded so amazing. I tried it, and it actually backfired on me. And I said, well, yeah, because it's not about the $20. It's not about what you're giving. You first have to engage in that relationship dynamically in that moment with that person, right? If you went and you told her that, look, I heard. One of my friends told me about doing acts of kindness. I really resonated, and I'm just practicing something. Could I get you an ice cream, or could I fill up your gas or something? Or maybe you tell them another story that's like relevant for you. That it's for example, it's like, oh, it's my brother's birthday, or it's such and such a celebration, and to honor them, I wanted to do something for someone else. Would you please allow me to, do something for you? Then that starts to create a relationship, because they can relate to what you're doing. Otherwise, they're just like, what is this out of the blue? And that's true not just with strangers, but even with people we know, where we connect with them, we already have a prior relationship, but in that moment, like, can we create a story? Can we create a connection that is fresh, where the person can relate to what you're doing? Like with your dad, maybe you bake like his favorite thing from home, and you bring it, and you said, "Dad, I don't know if you'd like this, but I made this for you." And after that, like, if you're like cleaning up and tidying up his bed, and you say, "Dad, if you ever need me to, make you a meal next time, just let me know." It's going to land in a very different place in him than you saying, "Look, I'm trying to do an act of giving, and he's not taking it because I just want to do that one thing in that one particular way."
And I'm hearing what you said earlier as we were talking. I'm hearing a little bit of, there's still something in there for me. What am I going to get out of it if I make that dinner for him? And he, if I make him sit down and eat the dinner that there still are those subtle little hooks and barbs in there, I can tell.
Absolutely. That was very insightful, yeah. Rachel Naomi Remen says it really eloquently. She says, when we help, we see life as weak. So it says, like, "Oh, Dad, let me help you." That's going to make Dad feel very weak. When we fix, we see life as broken. "Oh, Dad, let me fix this for you." He's going to feel like, "Oh, wait a second. Are you saying I can't fix it?" So when you help, you see life as broken. When you help, rather, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. But it is when you serve that you see life as whole. And so to be in that mode of reverence for this other person, and maybe the only gift you can give them is the gift of listening, or the gift of just holding space, or just smiling. I'm sorry. That's going to open doors for you, yeah.
I had a few of your smile cards, Nipun, and I was at a shoe store, and I was listening to this grandmother and granddaughter, and the granddaughter was a teenager, and they were having the most amazing conversation. You could just tell they loved and adored each other, and they, grandma's trying on the tennis shoes, and the teenager's going, "Those look great on you, Grandma," and the young teenagers trying on the high heels, and the grandma's going, "Wow, those look good on you. I wish I could wear those," and I was just listening to this amazing, beautiful connection between these two women, and I kept smiling at them because I was just so enjoying their relationship, and I felt, in essence, privy to it because, they were just being themselves, talking to each other. So I gave them one of the smile cards. I said, you guys made my day just by me being able to see how much you love and care for each other. So I just want to give this to you to let you know you made me smile, and I want you to pay it forward. Well, I tell you, the grandmother started crying. Then we sat down, we talked for 45 minutes. I found out that the history behind all of that, which had not been a good history, and the grandmother was was raising the granddaughter, and the granddaughter's getting ready to go off to college. And I mean, 45 minutes later, we were all just, in essence, best friends. And I left, we laughed, we cried, and I left feeling so filled up with having connected with people I will never see again in my life. Yeah. But by just being from myself, just letting them know how much they had given to me, and fed me, and then they in turn were fed, and it was a lovely experience, Nipun.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing where there was this beautiful viral video that's been going around. I forget which city, somewhere in the U.S. There was a grandma that's waiting in line, and there's a young mother up front, and she decides to, she's got a whole bunch of things that she's buying, and then she's checking out these diapers, and she looks at the price, and she's like, "Oh, that's a little too expensive. I didn't realize they were this expensive. Can you put them back?" And this grandma notices that conversation and says, "No, honey, you just keep this. I'm going to pay for it." And it just and there's somebody in the back with their cell phone that captures this, and then they ended up putting it online, and it's like it went viral online. But the reason why I think it appealed, when you see something like that, when you hear something like that, where somebody reaches out to someone anonymously, even as a stranger. It just kind of like, it makes you feel that we are in this web of deep, deep interconnection. And when you land in that place, even though you're no longer at the store experiencing that same circumstance, that connection is still alive in you.
Yeah. And it's easy to forget when you're running around doing your life, and especially, driving on a freeway and getting to work. And it's very easy to forget that we're connected.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of the way we've set up our world, unfortunately, it doesn't really facilitate this kind of by default. It doesn't facilitate this kind of a deeper connection, and so we have to work at it. And that's where you have to have these practices. Go out and do small acts of service. Go out and go practice trust. Be in community. Come from a place of abundance and enough. And I think when we do that, then the world opens up in a very different way.
Hugely. And I just have to say, I am grateful that you and servicespace.org and Karma Kitchen and dailygood.org, that everything that you and your team of volunteers are doing, Nipun, is becoming more global in that there are hundreds of thousands of people that are now participating. Yeah. Yeah, and that's really beautiful, and especially given, as we were saying earlier, like we started with no agenda. We still don't have an agenda. We don't have. In a way, we don't have any resources because like that's not what we're optimized for. So there's no fancy. We don't even have a brochure. We don't have. We don't go around parading saying go join Service Space, or even in this call. Like I'm doing this call because Bonnie at the Ventura Church says, "Look, Susan's a really great friend, and I'm friends with her, and so I just do it because of those relationships." And I think when you carry yourself lightly in that way, personally, as a community, as an organization, then I think it becomes disarming for people to connect to you, and through those connections, we start to create community. And that community starts to broaden our idea of wealth from just the singular, like money being wealth, to really thinking about so many different things. From capacity to listen is a kind of wealth, capacity to honor the earth is a kind of wealth, capacity to do acts of kindness and to experience inner transformation. These are all different kinds of wealth that can be, that I may be lacking in a certain moment, but if I'm in a community, if I'm, embedded into this community of interconnection, then whenever I'm lacking that, I will receive that. And this is all non-commercial. And when you do it in that way, I think you really open up to an entirely new dimension and a new way of being. Nipun, I am, again, humbled by our conversation and deeply grateful for all that you do. I'm going to cry. This is ridiculous. All right. But I'm serious, because this is the stuff that that we all need to practice on a regular basis. And the fact that you are living it and you're creating this paradigm that it has lasted since 1999 and it continues to just connect people, I'm just deeply grateful. So with that, Nipun Mehta, I want to read one quote that I read that I remember you saying years ago when I heard you first speak in Ventura. But it always resonates with me, and it reminds me when it's time for me to center in and give a little bit more than what I thought I needed to give. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna end the show because we're out of time. I'm gonna end the show with this quote. You said, "Service doesn't start when you have something to give. It blossoms naturally when you have nothing left to take." Nipun Mehta, thank you so much. And I'm just going to end with, and so it is, namaste.